Welcome to the flight deck. We have entered a cold and dark aircraft at stand Foxtrot 6 at Dubai International Airport. Cold and dark means that the aircraft is electrically dead, with all systems unpowered aside from certain items powered by the hot battery bus. The hot battery bus is wired directly to the main battery with no switch to isolate it. It supplies power to certain systems on the aircraft regardless of the position of the battery switch. Such items include fire extinguisher squibs and the air data inertial reference unit, which the hot battery bus will continue to power after electrical power is removed from the aircraft, even with the battery switch selected off. This will be the only cold and dark startup that we perform during the 777 training. At many operators, it is rare for a crew to arrive at a cold and dark aircraft. Large airlines have extremely elaborate support systems in place to prepare an aircraft for flight long before the flight crew arrives. Generally speaking, it can be expected that an aircraft will have been powered up and readied for the flight crew to step aboard and begin their cockpit preparation. This is not always the case, of course, and the rarity of the cold and dark start varies from operation to operation. Some pilots may go for months without starting their shift on a dead aircraft, while others may face the cold and dark scenario much more frequently. We want to cover as many bases as we can, so for this trip we're starting with a cold and dark aircraft and we'll guide you through the process of bringing her to life. Before applying any electrical power to the aircraft, it is prudent to run through a few common sense items to ensure that the aircraft is actually electrically dead and that a few critical items are as they should be. This isn't part of any published procedure per se, but for safety reasons it's a good habit to get into. Look up at the electrical section of the overhead panel and check that the battery switch and the APU selector are both in the off position. Next, come down to the lights and ensure that all external lights are selected off. On the forward panel, the landing gear lever should be selected down. On the control stand, check the position of the flap lever. If the flap lever is in any position other than up, investigate the reason. Similarly, the speed brake lever should be down. The last thing we want is control surfaces to start moving when electrical power is applied. The threat to maintenance personnel cannot be overstated. The reverse thrust levers should be down, and the forward thrust levers should be closed. Also confirm that the fuel control switches are at cutoff. As pilot in command, you are responsible for the safety and security of your passengers. A glance over the flight deck for suspicious or out-of-place items never goes amiss. Airport security is tight, but not impenetrable. You're one of the last lines of defense, so take a look around the flight deck for anything that shouldn't be there. We will check for the various documents and safety equipment required for legal operation of the aircraft later on during the preliminary pre-flight procedure. Now that we have had a glance over the flight deck and have satisfied ourselves that it is safe to begin the process of power application, we will begin following the various supplementary and normal procedures required to prepare the 777 for flight. The FCOM provides a rigid, step-by-step process that we will remain largely faithful to. However, bear in mind that what the FCOM lays out is idealized, and in reality is not always adhered to the letter. Certain prerequisites are specified for some individual checks, and for time reasons it may not be practical to wait for that prerequisite to be satisfied before continuing. A practical solution is to defer an item such as the flight instrument checks until both crew are ready to cross-check their instruments and the required items in the CDU pre-flight have been completed. Airline crews operate to strict schedules, and the concept of being commercially expeditious is something drilled into the minds of all commercial pilots. Clearly we are operating single pilot from the comfort of our homes, so due to that, a layer of realism is immediately taken away, but that doesn't mean that common sense shouldn't prevail where safe. We have modified the FCOM flows and procedures to fit single pilot operation. This allows us to skip some items on the first officer's side of the flight deck, yet include his main areas of responsibility to permit full operation of the aircraft. Let's dive in and begin. We begin with the electrical power-up procedure. This comes under the category of supplementary procedures, differentiated from normal procedures as they are accomplished on an as-required basis rather than being performed routinely on each flight. This procedure, combined with the steps we went through a few minutes ago, is accomplished to permit safe application of electrical power to the aircraft. Select the battery switch on. This connects the hot battery bus to the battery number 2 bus and illuminates some switch annunciator lights around the flight deck. The 777 has two batteries, a main battery and an APU battery. Each is a 47 Ah fiber nickel cadmium battery that weighs about 48 kilograms. The battery switch is an example of a so-called alternate action switch. There are two types of push-button switches on the 777 flight deck: alternate action switches and momentary action switches. Alternate action switches have two positions, on and off. The battery switch has been pushed in and is now flush with the panel. When we pushed the switch, a mechanical shutter on the top half opened up to reveal an on indication. These mechanical shutters are actually very intricate when you look at them on the real aircraft. Quite a cool piece of design. You can find these switches all over the 777 flight deck. An interesting piece of trivia: although the 747, 5, 6, 777 and 787 aircraft have this type of switch plastered all over the flight deck, the 737NG has only 4 of these switches. The EEC switches on the aft overhead panel and the cargo fire armed switches on the aft electronic panel. The second type of push-button switch on the 777 is the momentary action switch. Momentary action switches are spring-loaded to the extended position. They are used to activate or deactivate systems, or to reset system logic. A good example on the overhead panel is the drive disconnect switch, one for each engine. A single push of one of these switches mechanically disengages the IDG from the corresponding engine, a physical action that cannot be undone from the flight deck. Continuing with the electrical power-up supplementary procedure now. After selection of the battery switch to on, move over to the hydraulic panel and confirm that the Center 1 and Center 2 primary pump switches are off. These switches control the electric motor-driven hydraulic pumps for the center hydraulic system. We do not want any of the hydraulic systems to pressurize until clearance is given by the ground crew to avoid injury to personnel outside of the aircraft. All demand pump selectors should be selected off at this time. The demand pumps provide support to the primary pumps when the hydraulic system is under heavy load, for instance during major configuration changes. With the switches in the auto position, the pumps operate only when required. The on position forces the pumps to run continuously, while the off position inhibits their operation. Since we want the hydraulic systems completely depressurized for the time being, the selectors should be off. Note that the 2 demand pumps for the center hydraulic system are actually powered by bleed air. This means that across the 8 independent hydraulic pumps that we have on the 777, there are 3 types of power source: engine, electrical, and air. Continuing, both wiper selectors should be selected off. 2 windshield wipers and the hydrophobic coating on the number 1 windows are the sole means of windshield rain removal. Rain repellent fell out of fashion many years ago due to environmental and health concerns, although more recently, CFC-free fluids have been developed and marketed, but not for the 777. When the wiper selectors are moved to the off position, the wipers are allowed to move up and over lift blocks to position them off the windshield in the park position. The intermittent position sets the wiper to operate 1 cycle every 7 seconds, while the low and high positions set the wiper to operate at 160 and 250 cycles per minute respectively. Moving down to the forward panel, confirm again that the landing gear lever is in the down position. With weight on the wheels, a solenoid lever lock mechanism prevents accidental movement of the lever from down to up. The lock override switch mechanically releases the landing gear lever lock, allowing the landing gear lever to be moved to the up position, even with the aircraft on the ground. The alternate flap selector should be selected off. The alternate flaps mode inhibits hydraulic control of the flaps and slats, and allows direct manual operation through electric motors. Moving the switch to the retract position electronically retracts the flaps and slats, while the extend position electrically extends them. Maximum extension is flaps 20, with the slats at the mid-range position. The electrical power-up procedure now calls for us to establish electrical power. This can be either in the form of power from the auxiliary power unit, or from a ground power source. In our case today, we've requested ground power, and the avail lights are illuminated on the 2 external power switches. The 777's main engine and APU generators are able to supply up to 120 kV amps to provide the aircraft's primary source of AC power in flight. On the ground, however, it is acknowledged that 120 kV amp GPUs are not universally available, so 2 external power connectors are fitted, each rated for 90 kVA. Hence the 2 external power switches. Interestingly, should a 120 kVA GPU be attached to either the primary or secondary power input, only 90 kVA will be received. If only a single GPU is attached, it's highly likely that all of the aircraft's galleys will be rendered inoperable due to load shedding. Attaching two GPUs also helps reduce heat buildup on the electrical load management system power distribution panels. Select both switches on at this time and notice that the aircraft springs to life. This completes the electrical power-up supplementary procedure. We now have a fully powered aircraft and are ready to continue. Whenever electrical power is applied to the aircraft, the navigation light should be selected on to warn ground crews that the aircraft is operational. Do this now. Navigation lights on the 777 are located on the wingtips and the tail. Each wingtip has a coloured navigation light on the leading edge, red on the left and green on the right. The white navigation lights are located on the trailing edge of each wingtip and on the tail cone.